welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 30 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. Today, we'll be discussing chapter 29 of A Game of Thrones, which is Sansa 2.
As always, we'll chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, we'll provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the TV show, indulge in a little pedantry. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some extra information in case you need it. We may sound a little bit different, we're social distancing from the microphone. Is that right? Is that the right phrase?
I think
social
so,
distancing?
yeah. I'm a little concerned about the show notes. My sister has started listening, my older sister.
Uh-huh.
And I was saying she's not reading. She's just listening.
Relying.
Yes, just relying on us. And I said, are you using the show notes? Are they helpful? And she said, what are show notes? And I was like, I don't know. So I hope you guys find the show notes. They're there.
I thought you were going to add something to that sentence. I hope you find them useful.
Useful, yes.
Find them.
Step 1, find them. Step 2, I hope that they're useful.
All right, well, this is a long chapter, so let's get down to business.
Okay.
Quick recap of what Sansa was up to last time we saw her. Last time we saw Sansa, she'd been celebrating with Ned and Arya the news that Bran had awoken, and she was annoying Arya by being extremely excited about the forthcoming tourney.
Right. And annoying Ned as well.
Yeah.
He said, you guys aren't going, and she said, but please.
Yeah. I'm going to guess he's going to fold on that, as we'll see in a second. All right, why don't we give them the summary?
Let's do it. So the day of the Hand's Tourney has finally arrived, and Sansa couldn't be more excited. She travels to the field in a litter with Septa Mordane and Jeyne Poole. She's captivated by the spectacle of it all. The knights in their shining armor, the banners whipping in the breeze, and the shouts of the crowd. Every famous knight of the realm is there, along with newly minted knights and unknown hedge knights. Sansa thinks it's even better than in the songs, which means a lot to Sansa. Sansa and Jeyne sit among the high lords and ladies as the jousting part of the tourney unfolds. Even their own household guard Jory Cassel participates, though Septa Mordane thinks he looks like a beggar in his unadorned armor. He does represent himself well when the action starts, though.
Tragedy strikes when Sir Gregor's lance goes high and kills his opponent. The young man dies right in front of the girls. Jeyne cries hysterically over it and has to be taken away, but Sansa remains in control of her emotions like a noble lady should.
Yes.
After the last victory of the day, Sir Loras Tyrell picked Sansa out of the crowd and gave her a red rose. When she looked up from admiring it, Peter Baelish was in front of her, though she didn't know him. He said she had her mother's hair and touched her hair and cheek and then walked away. In the end, 4 knights remained when a halt was called due to the darkness. Sir Loras Tyrell, Sir Jaime Lannister, the Hound Sandor Clegane, and his big brother, Sir Gregor Clegane.
Later at the feast, Joffrey sits with Sansa and is sweet and charming to her all night. Sansa decides she couldn't be mad at him for Lady's death. It was Queen Cersei and Arya's fault. Later into the night, King Robert begins shouting at Cersei, insisting he will enter tomorrow's melee, and she can't forbid him to do anything. When Queen Cersei leaves, Joff tells Sandor Clegane to see Sansa safely back to the Red Keep.
On their way, Sandor takes issue with Sansa's fake politeness and her calling him Sir. He insists he's not a knight. After making her look at his burned face, he tells her that Gregor did it to him when he was a small child, just because he was playing with one of Gregor's toys. When they arrive at Sansa's room, Sandor says she tells anyone about their conversation, he'll kill her. And I think he meant it.
Yes. Certainly don't want to test her luck on
yeah. But it's interesting that they have crossed paths a few times.
Yeah.
The Hound and Sansa. And each time, I don't know if he likes her in some way. I mean, he seems like he's not a very emotional guy, but he seems to emote towards Sansa more than he does towards other people.
True.
I mean, that seems like a secret that he wouldn't want anyone to know.
Right.
Why is he telling it? Why is he telling it to this young girl?
Exactly.
You know? Anyway, so it's possibly the longest chapter of the book so far. A lot goes on, but a lot of it is just sort of jousting action, which isn't an awful lot to talk about. It's fun to read.
Right. It really is. It's a fun chapter, but when preparing for this episode, I was like, yeah, boy, what are we going to talk
Other
about?
than relating the jousting. We could run at each other either side of the table, reenact.
Let's turn this camera on. And anyway.
But Sansa loves it. She's overwhelmed by the spectacle of it, especially the way the knights appear.
Yep, right off the bat, we're introduced to many of the knights in the tournament. We get a look at Sir Jaime Lannister, Sir Gregor Clegane, Jon Royce, Jason Mallister, Thoros of Myr, 6 of the Freys, and Lord Walter's bastard son, Martin Rivers. And just a quick reminder, because you're going to hear these names mentioned, these surnames mentioned throughout. Each area of Westeros has a last name given to natural-born children or bastard children. We've got Snow, which is obviously in the north. We've got Rivers in the Riverlands, Stone in the Vale, Sand down in Dorne. Yep. Waters in the Crownlands, Flowers in the Reach, Storm in the Stormlands. Yep. Hill in the Westerlands, and Pike on the Iron Islands. Exactly. So anyway, when you come across these last names, you'll be able to figure out where they come from.
So Sir Gregor Clegane is huge. I mean, the Hound is huge, but Sir Gregor makes Sandor, the Hound, look like Sansa.
Right.
So he must be really enormous.
His nickname is the Mountain That Rides.
Yes.
Which that paints a visual there.
Yeah. So as we said, there's new knights, there's unknown hedge knights trying to make fame and fortune.
Yes, there's a particular. He's not a knight, but there's a particular entrant into the tourney named Jalabar Zoe, who scares Jeyne Poole. Which that's you were saying, I think it was last episode or so, how much you liked the name Masha Hedel.
Uh-huh.
And I really like this one,
You like
Jalabar
Jalabar
Zoe.
Zoe, yeah.
I just like to say it, Jalabar Zoe.
Yeah. So he's an exiled prince from the Summer Islands, which is south of Westeros.
Yes, we'll talk a little bit about the Summer Islands in the background info.
But Jeyne has a different impression of Beric Dondarrion.
Yes.
Who she's willing to marry on the spot.
On the spot. Yeah. Which Beric Dondarrion, you might remember from the last Ned chapter.
He arrived in the city just as Ned was riding by. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the guy.
So Ned's men, Jory, Alyn, and Harwin also participate.
Yeah.
Jory wins a couple of jousts and then loses a tiebreaker against... Who does he lose to?
It was just some... it was a free rider. That's right. It wasn't even... I was thinking it was a hedge knight, but it's not even a hedge knight. He's just a free rider. Right. What's her name? Mordain. Septa Mordain referred to him as a beggar knight, I think. Because
Jory,
Yeah, Sir Jory. Or not Sir Jory. But...
The Northerners don't go in for the fancy armor.
I'm a little surprised that Ned let them participate at all. I mean, Sansa had to beg just to be allowed to go watch.
Possibly there's the whole pride of the North thing. You know, you might think you want them to go out there and kick a few butts.
He might have picked a better cast.
Maybe.
I think the first two went down in their...
Well...
I think Alyn and Harwin went down in their first
Think about
tilts.
jousting. I guess it's like, skydiving. Until you've done it, you know what it's going to be like.
That's true. Yeah. So you want to give them a quick overview, like just a quick rundown of how some of the matches went?
Jaime Lannister beat Barristan Selmy, who himself had already beaten a couple of people 40 years his junior.
Yeah. And just 4 years ago, you remember in the last Ned chapter, Peter Baelish was talking to Ned, and he said, remember when they were looking out the window at Sir Barristan, and he said it was just 4 years ago he won the tournament. So even though he is more of an advanced age, he still handles himself pretty well. Yeah.
The Hound progresses, beating Renly Baratheon, and the Mountain, needless to say, progresses because it'd be hard to knock him off a horse, really.
It would be. It's hard to, I imagine
given his feet are dragging on the floor.
He just stands up.
And the last member of the final four is 16-year-old Sir Loras Tyrell, the storied Knight of Flowers, who won the last major tournament, beating Sir Jaime in the final.
Yes, for Joff's name day. That's when the dagger
changed hands.
Exactly,
yes. So Jeyne Poole keeps covering her eyes when man gets unhorsed, but not Sansa.
No, she knows how to sit like a great lady. And Septa Mordain even admired her composure.
I bet she did.
Yeah, everything's going along well. It's kind of a magical day for Sansa until Sir Gregor's second joust, wherein his lance rode up and caught a young knight in the throat, killing him.
Ooh, nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah, he goes down 10 feet from the girls and dies, spitting, coughing up blood.
Yeah, there's kind of a whole description of it, of the blood pouring out, and so...
Jeyne becomes hysterical and has to be taken away by Septa Mordane, but
not Sansa.
not Sansa.
No.
She's stoic.
That's right, no tears. In fact, she says she sits rather fascinated about it all because she's never seen a man die before.
She's channeling her inner Arya, if you ask me.
She's made of that tougher northern stuff.
Yeah.
But, then her rationale is that the young knight from the Vale was nothing to her. And I was like,
If she knew what we knew, she might not think that.
She may be struggling a little bit with the whole empathy thing. I guess, she is a 12-year-old, rather self-absorbed 12-year-old. So
yeah, but she does. Her empathy stretches to the fact he will never get mentioned in a song.
Yes, of that she will be sad.
So Loras Tyrell has got to the final four by unhorsing 3 members of the King's Guard, which is impressive, and drops Robar Royce in his last match.
With no problem at all. They barely even gave a description of it. Basically, he just fell off his horse.
There's a lot to get through. I mean, it's like cramming the whole sort of like NCAA basketball tournament into one chapter. There's a lot going on.
True.
I had a whole wall chart filling in names as they went.
You needed something to put a bracket around.
That's it. You call them brackets here. In England, I think we call them wall charts because you do them for the World Cup. You fill in all the results.
Right.
Man, I miss those.
Ethan was at he went up and helped one of his friends move some stuff out of his dorm, and they stopped at the sports bar in town. And Ethan said they were sitting there in a sports bar, and it was a Saturday afternoon, and all that was on was professional bowling and like a mid-'80s ESPN classic Big East basketball game.
Yeah.
So
my lack of memory is going to be very handy in this sort of like era of watching pre-recorded sports. I don't know who's going to win this. I saw it at the time, but I don't remember it now. So yes, after the last match, he gives his red rose to Sansa and says,
Sir Loras.
Sir Loras, yes, not Ethan.
Right. He'd give it to Molly.
No victory is half so beautiful as you.
Yes,
let's say.
And the love fest, between them is going both directions, because when she first sees him, she thinks he's the most beautiful person she has ever seen. So, although, if I were the Knight of Flowers, I wouldn't get too excited, because just the last Sansa chapter, she thought that Renly was the most handsome man she'd ever seen.
That's a very good point. But I mean, maybe
she's grown up.
It's a different thing.
Yes,
this is the most handsome man I've ever seen. This is the most beautiful person I've ever seen.
Right. Yeah, it is a whole other level.
All of this is like, and there's Joffrey too.
Right. She is from Winterfell. Maybe she hasn't really gotten out and seen the world. Every new person she meets,
everyone is stunted by frostbite up there. So her reverie is interrupted by Peter Littlefinger Baelish, suddenly standing in front of her.
Yeah.
And he obviously, I mean, he has his own spies and things, but this is the first time he's laid eyes on her, I guess.
At least come up and talk to her.
And he says, "You must be one of her daughters."
Yeah, never saying who her is, but I think we can figure out who that is.
Well, if he's correct, it means Sansa's mother.
Yes, you would think.
If he's wrong, who knows what he's talking about?
Could be any random woman. Yeah, he follows that up with, "Your mother was my queen of beauty once." A little bit awkward. Yeah. The whole thing's a little awkward, especially the next move. That gets a little borders on creepy here.
Yeah.
So he touches her hair and cheek and says, "You have your mother's hair," and then just walks off.
Yeah.
Like, what?
So she's watching this with Septa Mordane and Jeyne, although they've now scarpered, but because Ned's not there, because he, true to his word, said, "I'm not going to watch that thing," and he stayed away. So he's sending a message.
He didn't show his face.
Yeah.
Or his hand.
Oh, very good. And I guess he would argue that he's busy running the realm while everyone else is watching this unnecessary waste of money.
Right. Someone's got to hold down the fort.
Yeah. So after the day's jousting, there's a feast, and Joffrey sits next to Sansa. I'm going to go out on a limb here He did not like the whole rose thing, and he's like, I better get back in her good books.
Yeah,
That's my guess.
she says they haven't spoken since all the trouble went down in Derry where
Yeah,
the lady
Nymeria,
was
the
killed.
lady, yes.
So, yeah, it is coincidence that right after the most beautiful man she's ever seen gives her a rose.
Who's a couple of years older than
Yes,
Joffrey as
is,
well.
that's right.
So yeah, she's forgiven him. She put all the blame on Cersei and Arya.
Nothing bad would have happened except for Arya, she thought. Who had some revisionist history that only a 12-year-old in love could work up there.
And then she thinks Joffrey's too beautiful to hate. She bandies that around, doesn't she?
Yes, she does.
So she's scared that he's going to ignore her or be hateful towards her. But he actually, if you remember, on their date in the Riverlands, he was actually charming then too.
Yes, right. He sang to her and he
turns it on again.
Yes, he does. Turns on. I believe she refers to it as he was the soul of courtesy. So, yeah, and they talk a bit about the tournament, and I think Sansa asks him if Joff thinks that Sir Loras is going to win the tournament, and he says, oh, no, my Uncle Jaime will do for him, or maybe my dog. And when I'm old enough, I'll do for all of them. So, a little bit of bragging there. I guess.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing is, if you're the Prince of the Realm and she's your preordained wife, you don't really have to woo her or win her. You know, you don't have to woo or win anyone. You've won, you know. You're going to get what you get.
Yeah. Yes, and then he starts plying not just her with wine, but also Septim Dane with wine. And that's one way to... get rid of the chaperone is just get her drunk.
Drink her under the table, yeah.
Yeah, but of course Sansa says that she's drunk on the magic of the night. She doesn't
course.
even need the wine.
Yeah.
And he also...
Magic of the Night being the name of the red wine she's drinking.
It's right up there with Arbor Gold as the best wine. He even feeds her. He, I think it's some... snails or something.
I think I'm coming down with something. So then the feast is interrupted when the king suddenly starts shouting at the queen.
Yes.
And
as Sansa says, as drunk as a man could be. And this is Robert, so that's got to be pretty drunk.
Yeah. Although I'm going to guess she hasn't seen Robert in all his spectrum of drunkenness.
That's true. That's true.
I'm sure he's got more in him. Or potentially. He says that she's not to tell him what to do. Robert says Cersei is not to tell him what to do. He's king, and if he wants to fight in the melee, he will.
Yeah.
The melee, it's a huge battle, a huge free-for-all battle with 40-ish men. Last man standing wins.
Right. Which sounds like a terrible idea for the king to enter into it in the first place.
So although we in the next chapter we'll have a discussion about what will actually happen when he goes into that melee.
Yeah. He's not exactly been following the Barristan Selmy workout routine. Barristan Selmy's like 20 years older than him and in significantly better shape. So
yeah, and we talked about in fact I think maybe once or twice in the last couple of chapters that Maekor Targaryen accidentally killed his brother in a melee.
Right. So accidents, deaths can happen, but who's gonna hit the king in a melee? You know, so
Cersei storms off, her face a bloodless mask.
Yes,
and
Jaime goes to puts his hand on the king, tries to calm him down, and the king Robert shoves Jaime to the ground and kind of mocks him, and things get a little chaotic, I guess.
So Joffrey obviously I think wants to leave and go be with his mother at this point.
Yes.
So he asks, although he doesn't make that clear, he asks Sansa if she needs an escort back to the Red Keep. Yeah. She sees that Septim Dane is face down in her wine and says, thinking that she's going to walk back to the Red Keep with the prince, she says, oh yes, that would be lovely. And Joffrey calls for the Hound to take her back.
Like,
that's not what I wanted.
Oh, I'm good. I'll get an Uber. No worries. Yeah, so he bolts. Joffrey bolts and leaves. Yeah. Sansa was Sandor.
You know what? I mean, it's a little bit bad of him, but at the same time, he's obviously upset for his mother. Right. I'm going to forgive him. He's a young boy on that one.
Of all the things he's done, this is like the least offensive.
True enough.
So, yeah, but the Hound finds it quite funny that Sansa thought it was going to be Joff. He can tell in her disappointment. Yeah. So he laughs at her, and then he says. He tells her to hurry up and says, I may need to kill my brother tomorrow. So,
no time for this kind of thing.
Yeah. As we'll find out in a few minutes, there is no love lost between the two of them.
No. So Sansa's terrified of his burn face, but she's too courteous to comment on it. And she calls him Sir Sandor.
And says he's rode gallantly today.
Yes.
Which he does not take well to both the what he deems to be fake praise and also referring to him as Sir, because he has a hatred of knighthood. He believes it to be hypocritical.
Mm-hmm. Says that she's a pretty little talking bird who repeats pretty little words that she's heard. So then he tells her that Gregor killing the young knight wasn't an accident. The knight didn't have a squire to properly fit his armour.
Yep.
And the gorget, which covers the throat, wasn't fastened properly. And so he thinks that Gregor didn't fail to notice it. And actually, he said, Gregor's lance goes where Gregor wants it to go.
Right. That's quite the accusation from one brother to another.
But of course, I mean, it could just be that Gregor is a psycho who,
Yes.
when he sees the opportunity to kill someone, takes it rather than doesn't take it.
Yes.
Because he's a psycho.
As we learn in their very next thing they talk about, he's definitely got some temper issues. And possibly is a sociopath.
Yeah. So Sandor, the Hound,
Yes.
tells Sansa of how he came to have a burned face at the hands of Gregor, the Mounted.
He says that most people think it's just a battle scar. He said one idiot asked if it was dragon's fire, but really there's a story.
Yeah. So when Sandor was 6 or 7, the woodcarver from the village sent gifts to the boys. Sandor liked the toy knight that Gregor was given. Gregor was 5 years old and didn't care about the toy, but Sandor took it and played with it, and Gregor found out.
Oops.
He picked him up and shoved his face into burning coals and held it there until he was dragged away.
Yes, he said 3 men. It took 3 adult men to pull him off. He mentions that Sandor would have been, like 11 or 12 at the time, and then he was already 6 foot tall and built, strong as an ox, I think is what it was. So, And then, of course, his dad covered for Gregor and said that Sandor's bedding caught on fire. So, and then Sandor mentions that they treated the burn with ointments, and then he says, and 4 years later, Gregor got his ointment when he was knighted by Rhaegar Targaryen, and so began his hatred of knights.
That's where it stems from.
Yes. I think we started this episode.
Why is he telling her all this?
Right.
It's a strange family secret, which he clearly is embarrassed about.
Yeah.
He doesn't want people to know generally, but he's volunteering it now. I mean, maybe he's been drinking at the feast too.
Maybe he wants someone to know how terrible a person Gregor is.
Yeah. And I think something about Sansa just sort of breaks through his layers.
Maybe.
I don't quite know what it is.
Right. Yeah. It's not Arya. You could see Arya's got that unassuming. She can get along with people. You could see her as really relatable. Sansa doesn't come across, especially for someone like Sandor, doesn't come across that way. So,
but it might just be because she's pretty.
It could be. He finds her fetching. That.
Yes. But it definitely humanizes him at the same time being the opposite to Gregor.
Right. And she's thinking as the story's ending, she's no longer afraid of him. She's now more afraid for him.
Right.
So, I think that humanized him a bit. He opened up and told her a personal story. Yeah. And she puts her hand on his shoulder and says, he was no true knight, which then cracks the Hound up. He roars with laughter.
Yes, wasn't exactly the answer, the right thing to say, but you'll learn. So when Sansa gets to her chamber, Sandor tells her to keep quiet about what they've talked about. She says she will.
Yes.
Then
that's not enough.
For him. He says, "If you don't, I'll kill you."
Yeah, there goes that whole humanizing thing.
So that I think you suggested that he was embarrassed to have shared that story.
Yeah,
wants to suppress it.
He was probably, that was when they were still at the tournament grounds, and then they had to ride in a carriage over to the Red Keep, and he was probably thinking, why did I just do that? And I have to say, any oversharer, you're laughing because you knew where I was going with this. Any oversharer knows that guilt.
Yes. McKelly is the most oversharing person I've ever known, I think.
What about that lady at Harris Teeter? She was pretty oversharing too.
Which one?
The wine?
The wine lady?
Yes.
That's right.
Because you met her husband later. He described her as an oversharer.
I forgot all that, yeah. So there was at the local grocery store, there's a lady who gave out free wine samples, and I used to hang out with her quite often because when I go to the grocery store, if they're giving out free wine, I'll be there. And I knew this woman's life story just from like 2 or 3 times meeting her.
Yeah.
And then one time I went and there was a guy giving out the free wine, and it was her husband. And I knew so much about his life. He was kind of mortified, but he also didn't even have to ask where I'd got it all from. I was like, how's your dog? He was like, oh, God.
Oh, yes. Yes, I too suffer from oversharing. In fact, there's a chair that I often sit in at lunch.
Which does appear to have the magic. When you're not there, which isn't that often, the person who sits in the chair tends to overshare.
To see, it's not just me.
Yeah.
It's the chair.
I don't know though. I think what's happened is there's cause and effect mix up here. You're an oversharer who sits in that chair. When you're not at lunch, whoever sits in that chair feels that there's a sort of void.
That's true.
And feels they need to fill it.
There's a sharing void.
Exactly.
I think Hestia and I were talking about this on Twitter, and I said that fortunately I have the ability to edit on this podcast. So I have the time to think, oh boy, I probably shouldn't have shared that information, and I can actually remove it from the conversation.
You know what people are listening now are thinking? This is the edited version?
Yeah.
What gets cut out?
Oh, if you only knew.
So, some background information.
Yeah.
They mention the Summer Isles where Jalabar Jo is from.
Yes.
There are more than 50 islands. They're quite far south of Dawn, so they are sort of probably sub-equatorial, I would guess, although I don't know.
Yeah.
The occupants have dark skin. They have their own gods and history. Jalabar is an exiled prince.
Yep.
It's not quite clear what he's exiled for, but the reason he's in King's Landing is to convince Robert to help him regain his lands. Mm-hmm. And Robert, being sort of bored with life as a king of a stable realm, is quite interested in the idea of flying off and killing people for no real reason.
Yes.
We'll talk more about them later. I don't think it's worth it at this point.
Yeah, there's a decent amount of history on the Summer Isles. As things come up, we'll pepper in more info about it.
Thoros of Myr gets mentioned as a red priest. This makes him an adherent of the red god
R'hllor.
R'hllor,
Yeah.
R'hllor.
In the audiobook, I think they say R'hllor.
Okay. Up to now, we've only really known the 2 competing religions of Westeros, basically the faith of the Seven and the older faith of the Children of the Forest and the First Men, i.e. the old gods.
Right.
The red god, or Lord of Light, that Thoros is a priest of, is far more prevalent in Essos.
Yep.
The way we'll see it, it's easy to think of it as a fringe group because there are so few adherents in Westeros. But in Essos, its temples are in just about every city, and its main temple in Volantis is said to be 3 times the size of the Sept of Baelor.
That's big.
That is a big,
Yeah.
That is a big church, probably the biggest church on Earth, on the planet.
Yeah.
So it's a serious religion. It's not a fringe group at all.
It's just fringe in Westeros.
Exactly. The primary tenets are a battle between the Lord of Light and some nameless great other, occasionally referred to as the God of Ice and Death, which has got as you're listening to that, you must be thinking, wow, that sounds a little bit like what's coming from the north.
Right.
So I wonder if this religion might find more adherents in Westeros as the winter closes in, especially if what we think is happening north of the Wall is happening.
Yeah, good point.
The priests of R'hllor tell of the return of the ancient hero Azor Ahai in an ultimate battle with the Great Other. The Essosi legend of Azor Ahai I'll save for another time, but it is very reminiscent of the Westerosi legend of the last hero, who we've talked about previously.
Right.
It's almost the same story, in fact.
Yeah.
The priests can be male or female. They're taught to read fire. They spend a long time sort of looking and seeing beyond the flames into the sort of messages that can be read in fires. They wear loose red robes. The followers pray to R'hllor before fires, often for protection against the darkness as a whole. Death is considered to be a passing of the fire of life from this realm to sit beside the Lord in the Hall of Light.
All right.
Thoros himself came to King's Landing to convert Aerys Targaryen, but failed.
Yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah. He was in King's Landing during the sack of the city at the end of Robert's rebellion. He became a friend and drinking partner to Robert.
Yeah. I'm sure that sounds about right.
Yeah, well, if you're a friend to Robert, you're probably a drinking partner. Ned is the one counterexample.
Yes.
Echoing Azor Ahai, he too fights with a burning sword.
Right.
Azor Ahai had a burning sword.
Yes.
That's Thoros' emblem.
Yeah.
So yeah, interesting. It's interesting that Westeros and Essos are kind of equal in terms of their sort of military strength and sort of technology.
Right.
The difference is not very great. I think some things Essos looks a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
And certainly in the past that was true. In the
Yes.
early days, like when the Rhoynar came to Westeros, they were considerably advanced compared to the
It's definitely an older civilization in Essos.
But now they're kind of balanced, and so it's, well, I mean, I'm thinking about the sort of like the way Christianity was able to get into Asia and into Africa. There was a sort of imbalance of power. The Christians were coming from the more technologically advanced civilization,
Yeah.
and so it's easier to impose your religion or to get people to believe your religion if they see you having powers above them.
Sure, I get that.
Here, the Essosi and the Westerosi are fairly balanced, so it'd be hard to come in and say, "Oh, mine is the right religion."
Right. Yeah.
Let me show you because I got red robes. Check these out.
Watch what I can do with fire.
Yeah, I can look into it and tell you stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, like I said, there are obviously part of the tenets of this religion go to the current situation. There is this other threat coming from the north.
Let's call them the others.
Possibly call them the others, yes. And then that's what R'hllor is supposed to be fighting against.
Yeah.
So we shall see.
It's cool stuff.
So, comparison with the TV show, quite a few changes here. In the show, there's no room for Jeyne. She's not there. Sansa is actually sitting with Arya and Septa Mordain. Peter Baelish introduces himself and chats for quite a while. He tells Sansa the name of the Knight of the Vale who dies at the Hounds of Mountain. So in the TV show, we know who that is already. I think astute listeners have probably already guessed who it is. Peter then relates the story of the Hound and the Mountain. He tells her that.
I don't get why make that change. The Hound telling Sansa creates a little bit of a bond between the two of them.
Yeah, I think partly it's because if you think about the scene with Peter and Sansa, I think they wanted to develop their relationship a little bit more in the show.
Yeah.
Because that obviously those are both relationships that are going to matter.
Right.
Sansa's relationship with Peter and with the Hound, and I think that one needed a bit more of a boost than just the creepy stroking her hair and
That was
cheek.
creepy.
Yeah. There's no feast. So there's no detente with Joffrey. In fact, he shoots Sansa a poisonous look at one point during the day, which she sees. And yeah, and there's no frosty scene between Robert and Cersei over his decision to fight in the melee.
Was there the scene with the rose?
The rose was there.
Okay.
He did hand her the rose. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, Joffrey did not do what he did in the book, which is come back from that and say, "Well, I'm sorry. Sorry for being what I've been like for the last..."
Beautiful too, right? Remember? And look, I've got a little crown on my head.
Yes, he doesn't have that. Pedantry corner, I couldn't find much here, but Sansa is wrong to forgive Joffrey.
Yes.
I realize that's just an argument with the sort of creative decision of the book rather than sort of pedantry, but she's totally wrong. And Arya didn't do anything wrong.
No, I guess she needs to put the blame on someone, and she doesn't want to put it on Joffrey. That would ruin her storybook ending that she is working for. That whole storybook life that she wants. If it turned out her betrothed crown prince turned out to be a turd. For her.
So news and notes. I think possibly we're going to put an end to the episode bonanza after this week. Well, it sort of depends. Yeah. Coronavirus is making us sort of go both ways on this. On the one hand, we want to spend less time together so we don't infect each other.
Right.
On the other hand, it may free up some free time for us to stay on top of this, but
yes,
we shall see.
Yeah.
It's got rid of my soccer. I have no coaching and no playing soccer.
There you go. So. That's more time right there.
Yeah, it definitely is.
But, we'll see.
We'll tell them in the next episode.
Right.
Which we're recording in like 5 minutes, so we'll see how that goes. See if we've come up with a decision by then.
That's the one thing about these episode bonanzas. We have to record them so close together.
Twofers.
Yeah.
So in conclusion for this episode, lots of action, not an awful lot of substance.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Yeah, but there are some interesting relationships forming there. I mean, not much between Peter and Sansa, but they do meet for the first time.
Yeah.
Between Sansa and Sandor.
Yeah, those are, like you said.
A weird one.
Yeah. But those are definitely two influential people. One is the protector of her betrothed, and the other is an important member of the small council and someone who is supposedly helping his dad, her dad, and knows her mom. So,
yeah. And
a lot of connections there.
Sansa with Joffrey, that relationship develops again. But perhaps Sansa with Dolores. I mean, we've talked before about how the handing out of a flower at a tournament can change the realm.
It sure can. That's right.
Yes.
And he was giving out roses.
An aside, that was Rhaegar giving his rose to Lyanna Stark.
Which
yes.
Which ultimately led to Robert's Rebellion and tens of thousands of deaths.
Yeah. Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say that Sir Loras was giving out roses after every match, but he was giving out white roses. He gave Sansa the only red rose that he had, so...
Special treatment.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, it'd be interesting. I mean, she obviously thinks he's beautiful. Maybe another relationship that could grow. Yeah. And Septim Mordain and the red wine. That looked like a good relationship going. Right.
Yeah, she was... laughing and spilling her drink all over the place. And she was having quite the time. But then we get back to why does the Hound even tell Sansa this story? Yeah. You know, that's the thing.
And then it is weird in the TV show that Peter Baelish tells it.
Yeah.
Like, just revealing something about the Hound to her like she would care.
Right.
Why would she care?
At this point, she'd have no reason to care.
And it certainly suggests what a monster Gregor Clegane is. I'm a little bit terrified of him.
Yeah. Well... I don't think you are wrong there. He's a pretty scary guy.
Yeah. Anyway, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at ghostharrenhall, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
Yeah, all of our...
And the one we're not on.
And, you know, if you wouldn't mind, if you like what we're doing, if you would please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. That would really be helpful. Anything else?
No, that's all. Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.